And there were times I was just tired. I didn't want to do it. There was one time I was visiting my family in Chicago, and I was like, I'm on vacation. I'm not going to do it. And then about 45 minutes before Shabbos, I'm like, I got to do this. And I started typing out whatever I could. It just became a part of me. It became a part of me. It became something that I had a hard time letting go of.
Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Shark Tank, the podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a Ben Torah in the workforce. Since our very first episode, writing has been a major recurring theme on this podcast. Over the last two episodes specifically, we had some amazing feedback about the banker who wrote world-famous Sfarim, and about A.B. Rottenberg, who wrote Sfarim in addition to his music, which was in addition to his Parnassa. This week's episode also features a writer. But before I tell you about it, I want to share that we have opened a website that will feature writing from B'nai Torah in the workforce. Go to starktank.org to check it out, and please put in your email so that you don't miss a post. This week, we sit down with Reuven Kirschner. Reuven is a systems implementer for a tech company, but he is involved in many, many things on the side. He just published a sefer on the Parsha titled Groovin to the Torah, subtitled From Page to Path, How Sharing Torah Illuminates Life's Ever-Changing Journey. He is also one of the founders and leaders of the blossoming community of Karmei Gat, and we will discuss that as well. He also plays music, hosts a podcast called Career Canvas, and more. My name is Yaakov Wolf, and this is Shark Tank. Reuven Kirschner, welcome to Shark Tank. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Wow, what an honor. Aleichem shalom.
So let's start with a little bit of personal background. Where did you grow up, and when did you make the big jump to Aliyah and to being in Eretz Yisrael?
Well, I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, small little city in the middle of America. I finished high school there. I went to Skokie Yeshiva, and then I came to Hakotel. I was in Hakotel Shana Aleph, and then Shana Bet, I decided to go into the army. Was a lone soldier, combat soldier, and I joined that as a volunteer. And while I was in the middle of my army service, I said, "Who am I kidding? This is where I'm staying." And I officially made Aliyah in the middle of my army service, and I extended to do the full Hesder program, which is the 5-year program with 3.5 years of learning, 1.5 years of service, and went back to that hotel, was a madrich. I was a share assistant, and yeah,
And which unit were you in, and are you still doing Miluim?
I was in Totchanim, and I was in Miluim until about 2 years before the war, when they did a mass tzimtzum kochot. How do you say that? They did a mass reduction of the amount of people in the army. And so I was given an exemption. And then when the war started, I rejoined in the Home Front Command. And now there's a new unit opening up, which we'll see. We might have a whole Karmei Gat team joining together.
Very interesting, very interesting. And so you finished Hesder, and then you were still very much attached to Yeshiva, and I believe you were also doing some teaching in Hakotel or in other places as well. So tell us about that period in your life and what your thoughts were, what your deliberations were as far as what the next step post Hesder was going to be.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. When I was at the end of my Hesder in year 4, at the end of year 4 and year 5, the Mashkiach of Lifshitz came over to me and he said, "Why haven't you signed up for the teacher's college that everyone goes to?" I said, "'Cause I'm not going to be a teacher." He's like, "But you're already teaching. You're doing that stuff." And I said, "No, I'm going to study physical therapy." And then after a little bit of time, I actually signed up to be part of Machon Lev. I studied engineering there. But while I was in Machon Lev, I actually continued in different yeshivot. I worked in Eretz Tzvi. I was a madrich there, and I was teaching at nights. And then I was one of maybe the first hire of TVA, Yeshivat Torah V'Avodah in Bnei Akiva, and that I was a rakaz there, and I was running Night Seder, teaching, and I was involved with Bnei Akiva also in the summers, and I'd run programming for them, and I really thought that was going to be it. I was almost doing shlichut a bunch of times when I was single. When I was married, it's very close to doing that. But what ended up happening is during university, I was studying engineering, and I got an offer to work in a startup in the tech field as a student. And I was able to do that while I was still doing college, while I was still teaching. And so I did all three of those for about half a year. And then I was leaving Yerushalayim. I was on my way to Karmei Gat, and it became less feasible to stay in specifically what I was doing. And so then I moved full time into tech. And instead of doing shlichut in the States, we ended up doing shlichut in Karmei Gat. We'll talk about it a little later.
Very interesting. But I still don't really understand the answer to the mashkiach's question, meaning you're involved in all of these chinuch things. So what was it that made you stop short of going full on?
So I don't think I stopped short of going full on. I think I went fully on in the way that sort of very much resonates with what you're trying to accomplish here. I had a lot of personal examples growing up, starting with my grandfather, my aunts and uncles, and other family and people in the community that I saw were working. They were in the workplace. They were down to earth, and they were very much involved with all of their free time and all of their energies, not just teaching classes, which is something that that's what I was doing, but also being involved in greater community life. And it could be that I'll come back to at some point. I'll make a full circle back to the nonprofit world. But the reason why I didn't go into the teachers' colleges, and this is the actual reason, is I figured that if I was going to go into chinuch and I was going to stay in the education nonprofit space, I shouldn't come to it from the same perspective that most people do, but I would get a technical degree and I'd be able to help from a different perspective. That was sort of the idea. And then once you start getting these opportunities in tech, that they were hard to turn down from a financial perspective, from a taking care of my family, from the ability to try to balance more things.
Interesting. And you also mentioned that your first answer was about being a PT and you ended up going to engineering. So what changed between that and that?
Yeah, interesting. So I am very into fitness. I run a lot. I do other types of things, and I thought and I like people, love helping people, and I thought that PT was going to be the perfect profession for me. And I even took the psychometric exams like 3 times to get into a specific program that I wanted to get into. And then I found out about industrial engineering, which I had no idea existed. And in between, I did a course in Wingate, which is a physical education institute based in Netanya, but they have branches all over. And I became a personal trainer, like a workout room instructor. And once I had that certification, I felt, okay, well, I have this outlet where I can help people be physically strong, but then I don't have to go into it full time. I found out about this degree. I never was going to be an electrical engineer or a computer science engineer. That wasn't really what I like to do. But this industrial engineering was very good for me because it's sort of a generalist type of degree where you get to understand technology, but also understand business and ergonomics and organizational psychology. And there was a lot of robotic. We had a lot of different types of things that we can do. And I'm like, okay, wow, I didn't even know this existed. And so I jumped at the opportunity.
And are you currently using that physical training degree? Are you acting as a physical trainer for anyone?
Well, I've used it in in two workplaces. I actually would teach classes to my coworkers. I actually approached the executive team and I said, hey, I have this certification. I'd love to give workout room classes. And one of the places had a shower. The other one was during COVID, so we did it on Zoom. And I actually got paid a little bit on the side, a little extra money. But it was like it was more about making the connection with people and building goals, and then people feel comfortable talking to you, and you have another avenue in which you can talk to people. And so I still use it now recreationally around my community and with other people. They did some videos I recorded that I share with some family and friends that have asked for it. And so I don't make money out of it, but I make connection.
Very cool. And so now what are you doing with this industrial engineering degree? What type of tech work are you doing and what type of skills are you applying? What type of knowledge are you using?
Great. Yeah. So I work as what's called an implementation engineer. That doesn't mean a lot to most people when I say it. Sometimes doesn't even mean much to me. But the quick version is I started off as a student. I was a data analyst or a product analyst, and then I moved to a data analyst role. And then I moved into customer success. Data analyst was just looking at data and trying to fix it so it fits into a different system. And then customer success, I was actually working with the clients and I was helping them troubleshoot problems. And then I moved into implementations, which is really the stage between being a account manager or someone that's just taking care of the client's needs, from how you doing, is everything okay, can I give a training session, to working with the technical teams and connecting the systems. So if, let's say, right now we're using Riverside and you want to connect Riverside to to your website, it's not exactly a one-to-one, but I would be the one that would say, okay, I need Riverside's connection details, I need Gmail's connection details, and I make sure that that works together. So that's sort of what I'm doing now. The company that I'm working with, I just connect our system to their system, make sure everyone's talking and everything gets where it needs to get.
Okay. So let's transition to talk about your latest project, which is going live any day now, your new book. Mazel tov on that. So let's take it to the beginning, because I don't think it started as a book. It started as sort of a different project that ended up becoming a book. So tell us a little bit about your writing on Torah and other topics.
Yeah, it didn't start off as almost anything, actually. When I was in yeshiva, I went to Poland, and Poland, we went right after Sukkot, which is very fortunate. There's some programs that go after Pesach. So I was in Yeshivat Kotel. We went after Sukkot, and I had this experience in Poland where all of a sudden I felt very uncomfortable. Even when I got off the plane, I felt like everything was in black and white. Like I was watching the Holocaust movies from my youth. Probably shouldn't have seen them, but that they showed it to us in school. I don't know. Maybe we have better a sense of what we should show our kids. But that's like sort of how I viewed that whole trip. And when I came, like in the middle of the trip, I realized that I just don't want to be here anymore. I want to go home. And for the first time in my life, when I said home, I wasn't referring to Chicago, I was referring to Israel. And when I landed, it happened to be Parshat Lech Lecha, which is all about Avraham coming home to Eretz Yisrael. And I was like overwhelmed and exhausted. And I just sat on my computer and I just started writing, and I sent it out. I wrote up a whole thing talking about my experience in Poland and how I'm so happy that I'm home. And I sent it out to my parents, basically. And then the next week, I was learning the Parsha, and I realized, oh, well, there's more Israel stuff, Zionism, this kind of whatever. And I started, and I wrote again. And this time I sent to my parents and my siblings. And then they said, hey, why don't you send it to the grandparents? And why don't you send this? And then people in yeshiva saw me writing on Thursday nights. And so I started just writing every week, just different thoughts that I had on the Parsha. Once I got into this sort of zone, I'm like, okay, I guess this is just what I do. And I continued writing an email, which grew into, I can check, it was like 300 people by the time I was finished writing it, for 10 years, including when I was in the army before smartphones. I had to use T9 and went through university, and when I got married, having kids, and moving out of Yerushalayim into Karmei Gat. So there was a 10-year span where I was writing an email every single week. While I was writing this, I would get comments of like, "Hey, when are you going to put this? When do you put it into a book? When are you going to make this more organized?" And I'm like, "I'm just writing. I don't have any ambition to do that. That's not a thing." When I look back on it a couple years ago, like 4 years ago, I realized that what I had done is that I wasn't just following a specific perush or a specific mahalach. Every year, I would approach it from a different perspective and a different angle. So, from the first year, I was more on the Zionism side. From when I was in university, I was bringing in examples from physics that I was learning, and when I was in the army, I had a lot of army perspective, or just like, and the structure changed when I was writing, and the content changed, and I would talk about current events and connect them. And what I realized is that what I had been doing was not writing Divrei Torah. I'd been writing a diary, which was being guided by the Torah that I was learning. And that was a very impactful realization for myself. And when I was talking to some people, Tzvi Goldstein is probably the biggest example over the years. He's like, this is something that's like real. This is something that can be not just impactful for you, but you can do it for other people, especially people that are going through that 18 to 28, trying to figure out your identity and trying to figure out how you can make the decisions and paths and how you decide what you want to do with your life. And so I said, okay, you know what? It's not a bad idea. And I started gathering because, as I mentioned, I didn't have a system. I was in different places. I'd send from phones. I didn't always even send it from my own email address. have some crazy stories about that. And I just have to ask people, and I was asking my parents, and just trying to gather all of them. And I really almost have a 100% of the 10 years straight of writing stuff. And I started putting it together and just structuring it. And when I got through it, I actually wrote a LinkedIn post about this. I was just copying and pasting it all into one big Google Doc. And when I got into like towards the end of Sefer Bamidbar, I'm sorry, to the end of Sefer Bamidbar, all of a sudden Google just said, "You can't do anymore. You've exceeded 1 million characters." And I'm like, "What?" So anyway, at that point, I realized that I wasn't going. A lot of the stuff actually wasn't readable even for me afterwards. I took 2 or 3 from every parsha. One year I did the Haftorahs. I had different essays that I wrote that were just talking about different experiences that I was having over those years. And I narrowed it down to, and intentionally trying to show that just like life is incongruent, so the style of the book is going to be incongruent. And the final push to do it was when I learned about self-publishing. And I realized that it's not such a big deal to, if I put in the effort and the work to just get it organized and set up, then I can get it out there.
Wow. So first of all, I want to echo the shout out to Rutzi Goldstein, who has been a big force in this podcast, both on the mic and off the mic. So thank you to Rutzi for that. I want to ask you, 10 years is a very, very long time. And obviously you mentioned all of the shifts in your life that happened through that. What do you think motivated you to keep on plugging away at it week after week for all those years?
So one of the things, it's a great question. And I don't really know the answer. I do know that I tried sometimes to stop because I'm just like, this is just, it's a lot. I don't know how many people listening to this have tried to write your thoughts down, but it's really not easy. When you learn something, you think it's very clear in your head, and then when you start writing it down, it's hard and it takes time. Even when to get better at it, it's still, you have to have like the focus and the ability to do it. And there were times I was just tired. I didn't want to do it. And I remember specifically, there was one time I was visiting my family in Chicago, and I was like, you know what, I'm visiting, I'm on vacation, I'm not going to do it. And then about 45 minutes before Shabbos, I'm like, I got to do this. And I was like, everyone be quiet. I put headphones on and I started typing out whatever I can get out. That Devar Torah probably didn't make it to the book, but I continued. It just became a part of me. It became a part of me. It became something that I had a hard time letting go of. And even now that I'm not writing an email, I still share my content on YouTube, on put it on WhatsApp status. I try to do it different ways every year. I try to do a different type of, just to keep things a little different. And there's one other aspect to it that kept me going, and this is maybe probably the biggest aspect, is I used to also include shout outs. Basically, I had a newsletter before I knew it was a newsletter, before it was cool. And I would shout out people. I'd say happy birthday, what's going on, and things like that. And I would have a lot of people that would respond to me, and or they'd tell, hey, you missed my birthday, or it's so exciting that you're doing this, or what about that? And so there was like an interaction, and sharing this Torah was a way of staying connected with people that I otherwise wouldn't have stayed connected to. And it was very meaningful for me to keep those connections. And so that was another thing that pushed me pretty hard to keep going.
And one other part of this story that I'm trying to understand a little better is that you came to this realization that it wasn't really about the Torah per se, but it was actually a diary and it was really a reflection of yourself through the Torah, which is a very, very powerful and important idea. But then take me from there to Rav Tzvi Goldstein's realization that there was something here that others would read, because the diary is a great tool for Reuven to process, to write, to think, to be engaged. But why, why, why is it, to be blunt, like why should others care about Reuven's diary?
Well, first of all, there is content that is going to be, it's not today, dear diary, I felt terrible today. So it doesn't necessarily read as a diary. Only when you see in the introduction, I have a legend of where I was in life. And you could say, oh, that's interesting. I can understand you wrote in this type of style because you were in the army. But I think the idea is the way that I was approaching the world was through the lens of Torah. And if you think about your own learning, then you'll see that it's true for you as well. Let's say you read the Parsha every week or every year, and you go back to your notes. If you have any notes written down anywhere, you'll read it and be like, I remember exactly where I was then. And I'm hoping that this can be, besides for being insights and just generally being short ideas, Wortlach, that you can take with you, it will encourage people to take on their goals that they want to do, and appreciate I mean, this is a project over 10 years, even more, but 10 years of writing. it doesn't take 10 years to write a book, or even to write your own notes. And I think it's a good question. What are people going to take out of this? And I hope what they take out of it is I can also view the Torah. I can also view my life through the lens of Torah, and I can also make decisions based on the guidance of the weekly portion and what that has to offer.
I guess what I'm really trying to drive at here is that I also struggle with a similar. I guess I'm projecting some of my own struggles and insecurities onto you, so I apologize for that. But I'm also doing writing, and I'm writing about topics of Torah and Derech Eretz and some of the sugyas there. And I oftentimes get stuck in this trap where like maybe a rabbit hole that I would love to go down and research and take notes on and write about. But then I thought like, is there really any value to the reader in this? And the simple answer to that question is sometimes no. And then I get a little bit stuck because like writing for an audience and writing for myself, I sometimes view those two things as never the twain shall meet. And then I get a little bit frustrated, like which path to go around. Sometimes there are synergies, and that's beautiful, but not always. So what would your advice to me be in those situations?
It's a great question. When I was in my fifth year of yeshiva, I was approached, or my fourth year, before I was going to my fifth year, I was approached by somebody who asked me to go on shlichut to a, a city in South America. And they said, instead of your fifth year in yeshiva, why don't you come to South America for the year? We'll work it out. It'll be fine. I said, I don't speak Spanish. I won't be able to be effective. And they said, what he said to me, and you could tell me if this resonates with you, is if you have your charisma, first of all, you'll learn. But even along the way, if you have your charisma and you have your genuine excitement and love for what you're doing and what you're teaching, that speaks volumes, and that will be reach the people that you're trying to talk to, and even the ones you're not. So I guess what I would say to you is what I say to myself is, if it's something that you believe in, that is impactful and is good, somebody will appreciate it. And I don't need 1,000 people to think that every single idea that I wrote is good, but for sure the concept of it is good. And part of having Sfarim around you is when I look up on the shelf and I see the different types of Sfarim that I've read or that I have pieces of, and I'm like, it's inspirational to be surrounded by those types of ideas. So even if the week by week, there's some that you're gonna like and there's some that you're gonna like more. You see what I did there? But even if you know me and if you've read one of the ideas, and if you just know what the idea is meant, then I think it can be something that's impact helpful to achieving your goals. And I'll just give one example about that. That when I was talking about this goal throughout this process, as I'm getting closer, I talked to some people in my community, say, "Oh, I'm getting a little closer to do this." And then one person said to me, "You know what? I have no ambition or intention to write at all. But I do have this other project that I'm working on, and you've inspired me, and I'm going to start working on that instead." And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Right. So I guess maybe a couple of things just to respond to that. And I think it's very interesting, all the things that you said. So first of all, you mentioned the word charisma, which I think you have a lot of and I have very little of. So happy for you for that. But I think also just more seriously, charisma can very much show through when you're talking about an in-person setting, a Dvar Torah, a speech, a class. When you talk about writing, it's a little bit different. That's one thought. Another thought is that I guess maybe because you are more naturally a people person, and maybe your thoughts and your perspectives are a little more attuned to stuff around you. Like the example that I have in my head right now for my own writing is that I'm currently learning a Rambam about Talmud Torah, and there are a few sort of words and diukim that I'm going deep and trying to figure out why the Rambam used this word, not that word, and is he going like Rashi or is he going like the Meiri? And so like those type of things, I enjoy writing and reading about them and thinking about them. I don't know if anyone else really cares, and I don't, and that's fine. But then the question is my energy best spent, going down the rabbit holes which I enjoy, or maybe trying to focus more on the needs of the audience, what people are thinking about and feeling as mentor in the workforce, and crafting my writing towards addressing those issues.
I would say that, first of all, if you're concerned about are people going to enjoy it because of it, you have to first understand if it's because of the content or because of how long it is. So if you're saying you're going down a rabbit hole, maybe you want to say a executive summary or a TLDR. This is the main idea that I want to talk about, and then have the rest of it afterwards for people that want to have a deeper insight into it. But I would also say that there's a lot of books that are, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I have an experience that if I see something that is published by one of my Rebbeim, Rev Turrigan, or if I see something from Rev Sachs, or I'm just going to read it. It doesn't matter what the topic is. I'm going to listen to it. There are certain people and figures that when you put stuff up, when Rev Tzvi Goldstein puts stuff up, when there's different people that put stuff up, I'm going to put my effort into reading it because I know who the person is and I know the intentions behind it. I think that part of that is I know so and therefore I don't know how much the content matters, and you should be cognizant and aware of what the content is, and that's one of the reasons why I always tried to keep it to about a page, because I wanted to make sure that people are I get the point out, and hopefully it's enough, and we can always talk more. But also another aspect of it is making sure that people know about it, and if they know Yaakov, if they know Reuven, then they're going to be more willing to give it a chance.
That I like that, and I think that there's something to that. Like when people, I guess, I mean, I know it's mainly like my mother, likes to read things that I put out, and and I appreciate that always. But I think that when people realize that there's something, that there's a person behind the writing, and there's a mission behind the writing, that already sort of covers a lot of the bases that maybe I wasn't thinking of before. So I think that's a good point.
And that's one of the things that you're facilitating, and I'm appreciative of that. You can tell people about this, and when you write about it and you stay active, I have no personal, I mean, I guess I have an ego, but I have no personal desire to write on LinkedIn. I feel like my time could be better spent not writing on LinkedIn, because then and getting sucked into that world. But if you want to share the content that you have to create it and you have to be visible. And if you're visible and people like you, then they're going to be willing to read the stuff.
Right. So a big milestone on the book. We'll definitely include links in the show notes for everyone to go out and check that out. I do want to transition and talk a little bit about Karmei Gat, which you referenced before. So maybe just give us a little bit of a timeline as far as the years and your age and stage, as far as when you first heard of Karmei Gat and when you made the decision to move to Karmei Gat, and the other big milestones in the Karmei Gat story.
How much time do we have? It's a story that goes back almost 9 years already. 2015, I got married. In 2016, my wife and I were looking for where we were living in Yerushalayim, and we loved Yerushalayim, and it's amazing. And I would never tell anyone to leave Yerushalayim. But one of the things that we felt was lacking was a sense of community and ownership over a certain community. Not that there isn't places we had connection to, Nitzanim, and there was other places that uh, Rav Ansbacher, and there's Be'oro Neilech with Rav Ansbacher Shul, and there's a bunch of different and Makor Chaim, and there's a bunch of other places. But the thing is, if I was gonna get up late, I didn't have I would just, if I wake up, I'd go to the Stiblach, or I'd stop. And there's like a 7 million shuls between where I am and where I was going to go. And so everything just was very fluid, and people live far away. And so we realized that it wasn't going to be the place that we wanted to raise a family. And so we started looking around what are the places that are out there. One of Talia's cousins told us about this place, Karmei Gat. And we said, what is Karmei Gat? And he said, it's Kiryat Gat. I said, where's Kiryat Gat? I'd been to Kiryat Gat once before, and I thought it was at the end of the Negev, close to where you live. Oh, but then no, check it out. It's like this new. It's like the next Modi'in of the South. And I was like, okay, whatever. We'll check it out. And so we drove down there, and it didn't take as long as we thought it was going to. It took I guess there was no traffic that day. If I would have known what traffic was like, maybe I would have changed my mind. But we got we got there pretty quick, and we met with the
It was like 40 minutes without traffic from your
It was
line.
45 it was 45 minutes, yeah. It was 45 minutes from where we were living in Katamon to Karmei Gat. I don't think I've ever driven it that fast since. It was just Siyata Dishmaya that Hashem wanted us to go there. And we were also, as I was mentioning before, we were more me, but we were trying to figure out, we had a good opportunity to do shlichut. We went to go check it out, and we were like, okay, fine. This is going to be the place. It was June of 2016. We signed. It was not going to be ready for 2+ years. Also, it wasn't on Google Maps. We weren't able to really find it. There were no streets. When we sat with the contractor, he's like, the salesman, he's like, look, there are street lights. I'm like, that's great, but there are no streets. Like, really, it was really in the really beginning. And we said, you know what, we'll buy it. We see the location. It's close to the train. We have no idea what this is gonna be, but maybe we can get some of our friends to move here, and we can try to build something small. That was in
So
2016.
I just want to clarify, if I understand correctly, you were looking for a community and you found a potential community. So you're basically taking a risk, a gamble that you would be able to build a community that you were dreaming of on this sort of blank slate.
Right. Yeah, we didn't know anyone. As far as I know, we were the first Anglo family to buy in Karmei Gat. And when we actually moved in, it was such a novelty to hear people speaking Hebrew with an accent. I can't get rid of it, won't go away. That everyone just assumed that we were from Evan Shmuel, which is a moshav next there. Like, oh, Evan Shmuel. I was like, no, no, Kiryat Gat. Come on, I'm like you. We're like the same. Let's have some arak. But it took a while for them to understand that there was actually we were very few people at the time, but it took a while for people to really appreciate it. And now we're the biggest community, but we're skipping all those steps.
Was I just want to push back on that for 1 second and just clarify: are you drinking arak? Because the guys beneath Sim are still trying to get me to do it, and I haven't given in yet.
I drink arak. That's my drink of choice, actually. People think it's weird, but I like black licorice, and so that's how it goes.
Okay.
Um, so that's in June of 2016 is when we actually signed. We had another friend that signed 2 weeks later. That friends of ours that were like, "Wow, this is gonna be great." Then they went on shlichut for a couple years, but whatever. And we're like, "This is gonna be easy." And then we had like crickets for like half a year. No one budged. And within that half a year, I got connected with Nefesh B'Nefesh. Had this ambassadors of the South. They had a Go South program, and they invited us to be part of their cohort. And through that, we made some connections with the local municipality in Kiryat Gat, the area. And I met with the mayor and I said, I have this huge community of like 8 families. This is a year later. And we need a place to set roots and have our community. He's like, great, no problem. And he saw the potential more than I did. But once we started working with them and said we're going to have a space and a community center, then that was able to sort of get a little bit more families. And by the time people started moving in 2018, my house was ready in 2019. By then we had 12. No, in 2018 we were 12 families, and then in 2019 we were 30 families.
And
That
then
was
COVID
mixed.
struck.
Oh yeah, COVID came, but people kept moving in COVID. We went from 30 to 60, and then from 60 to 120 the following year, and then 180. Now we're like 230, 240 families. So in 5 years, we went from 12 to 240, uh, which is an insane amount of growth. And it was there's a lot of we could take this in a lot of directions. So you can ask a question.
Okay, so I guess I'll say this first of all, just to clarify for listeners who don't know, Karmei Gat is a section of Kiryat Gat, a new section built very uniquely and with a lot of interesting city planning. And so you sort of hopped on the train as it was opening up in the very early stages, and was able to bring Americans and Anglo families. And then when you sort of say we were X amount of families, are you talking about like members of your shul or people who you know who speak English in Karmei Gat? Like, what's the definition, and how are you defining that community that you are a part of?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to clarify that we're not an English shul, even though, especially at the time when we started, I actually have an email that I sent out. You can find it on LinkedIn, but I have an email that I sent out that I was to like 40, 50 of my friends. And I said, this is our opportunity to not be the next fill in the blank. I don't want to call out specific communities, but fill out the blank of communities that do the announcements in English and everything's in English. Because what I saw is from my friends, from my friends from yeshiva, from university that grew up in those places, that they didn't feel comfortable in their own shuls because they weren't Anglo. They're Israeli. They either they're born there, or they came when they're very young. And I said, if we're going to build a shul from scratch, we have this zchus, we have the opportunity. It doesn't come very often in this type of way. Then we have to make it that we are an Israeli shul that is going to hopefully attract our children to stay close to us. And in the beginning, we were the English speakers were a minority. Now it's by far a majority, although many of the English speakers are people from Beit Shemesh, who are both. So I wouldn't say we're an English shul, but we have a lot of Anglos, and we're an Anglo style shul for sure. And one of the things that was important in the first years was establishing having that we were a shul that has a rav, and that we also got land that we're going to hopefully be building on soon. So those are two different aspects that are definitely Anglo leaning, but the shul itself is run in Hebrew, and it's something that's important. dagesh, important point to make.
I see that you do a good job of not using English too much, so thank you for that. But maybe just could you clarify, like you were afraid or you wanted to very much avoid certain patterns that you had seen in the current communities. So, what type of lessons did you learn from them as to like what not to do?
So there's actually so much history over here. First of all, I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people in different communities, but also in our own community. Trying doing a lot of surveys. Surveys don't really work so well, but a lot of one-on-one conversations with people and hearing what they think and what everyone has an opinion. If you're willing to listen, they will tell you their opinion, and if you're not willing to listen, they'll still tell you their opinion. And hearing what people have to say, and trying to really figure out because everything that somebody says has some truth in it, and unless you're in it, unless you're putting in the time and the effort to see and seeing the big picture. So you can have the greatest intentions, but what you think is totally right in it. How can the show do this? And with this such a terrible decision it wasn't made in a vacuum. And that's an important thing. So one of the ways that I think we were able to navigate the beginning years, that first of all, we tried to be a datilu mishul, an Ashkenazi datilu mishul, but we had a lot of people that were Edu Tamizrach, and we tried to a separate minyan. In the end, it didn't work out. It's very difficult to try to blend the different types of cultures. But we were able to stick our guns and we were able to say, this is the type of shul that we are and this type of shul that we want to be. As far as we're going to be a Hebrew speaking shul, we're going to be welcoming, we're going to have the Anglo aspect of community and chinuch. Huge. We have like 500 kids in the shul, of which like 300 are up to the age of 3. And we have 8 or 9 different learning opportunities for different ages just on Shabbos morning, not to include what we have during the week. And these are like very important foundational points that we were able to make in the beginning and follow through with it. So learning from what went well and what didn't go well, and then just being able to stay strong to a lot of the noise.
Right. And when you and your wife were envisioning, a community, and you're keep on going back to the word community, and it's a word that I think a lot of us think about a lot. What were your maybe give us a little more about what what that looks like. What were you hoping for? What were you dreaming for? And what are you doing to make that dream a reality? You mentioned some of the things already, but a little more about because all of us like want a community, want a nice community, but that sometimes is just like a buzzword for some paradise that we hope to one day inhabit.
Yeah. And it changes all the time. I think that if when we're thinking about a community, I think the most important thing that we want is a safe environment, a safe and inspiring environment for ourselves and our children. Now, what that means changes just like we change and our needs change. When I was in yeshiva, I was in a very different place than when I was newly married, which is a very different place than when I had one kid, and very different place than like not like life changes and the time that you have in the investment and the mental energy and what you actually want changes. And so when we say community, my vision and what we've been able to achieve so far, and hopefully will continue in Karmei Tzion and Karmei Gat, is to have this huge shul that is going to be able to cater to a lot of different people, give people a way that they can feel not judged, but also pushed to be better, whether that's to their neighbors with chesed, whether that's to coming to shiurim and taking part in different chesed opportunities to outside of our community, or whether it's educational opportunities, or whether it's just having a place that they know the women's section is always open and there's no men there during davening. Like these are the types of things that we wanted to create, these pockets that people can find their circle and hopefully be inspired by the greater good that we're trying to create. And that comes with not being judgmental, but also trying to keep your yad ala dofek, keep your finger on the pulse.
Right. And
So I'll say that this community is not exactly as I envisioned it was going to be. I certainly didn't. I dreamed pretty big, but this is much bigger than I even dreamed initially. But it's a big zchut to be a part of it, and not only that we have this place that people have found comfort within different age brackets and different walks of life, but also a place that people can make aliyah to and feel comfortable. I think it's mind-boggling. We had in the first 4 years that we were here, there were, I think, 4 people that made Aliyah to here, and now we get tens of families that come in the past 2 years. Like it's just tens of families that are coming or they're looking into it, and somehow, some way, I used to say Karmei Gat, and I have to explain on my hand. This is Yerushalayim, and you can't see my hand. You can, but this is Yerushalayim. This is Beersheba. We're like over here. It's close to Ashkelon. Like, and now I say Carmei, and they say Gat. Like it's totally changed much faster than I expected. But Baruch Hashem.
So throughout this whole process of building a community, interfacing with the Iriya, with Nefesh B'Nefesh, and all these different stakeholders, could you give us one pleasant surprise and one of the most unpleasant surprises or things that you weren't expecting in this process?
The pleasant surprise is that with all of the talks, I think there's a stigma, and it comes down to jokes, humor, Jewish humor, that you need to build 3 shuls for 2 people. Right? So you have the shul that no one goes to. And I think that and there's always talks of that. We need to break away. We're too big. There's not enough space. And I mean, it's kind of true. We're bursting through the seams. We're in a temporary structure now. We're hopefully going to start building soon and build a nice, beautiful shul. But even when we move into that shul, it won't be big enough. Like, I think that's always the case for shuls and communities in our stage of life that have growing families, Baruch Hashem. But I think one of the things that I'm pleasantly surprised is that we're still together. And as much as people talk about breaking away and there's needs, and people make the minyanim in different places, but in the end of the day, everyone's part of the same shul with the same vision, and it's still maintained this nice vibe. If people come over to me and I say, hello, welcome, are you new? And they're like, this is such a nice place. And that is something that I've been pleasantly surprised that it's been able to maintain that integrity over the years. Unpleasantly surprised, I guess.
You're too positive of a guy.
It's hard to say unpleasantly surprised. I mean, I would go to my political interactions within the city and within the area, and with the election cycle that just happened. And it's really sad to see politicians from the inside, and to see how a lot of the wheelings and dealings actually are happening when people have a position of an opportunity, a zchut, a tremendous ability to help a lot of people, and they are taking deals and doing types of things. And I think that we figured that out pretty early on. We meaning all the people that were here. I got a lot of guidance from the Tsabarim, the native-born Israelis that were part of forming this community. One of the things that we established early on, and it was very difficult in this past election cycle, but we are apolitical. It's very, at least American. I think it's Anglo. I think it's a Chutznik thing in general. But we are apolitical. We are not going to tell anyone how to vote. We'll give information. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. We're just going to keep doing our thing. We're going to keep being positive. We're going to keep being respectful to everybody. And um, so I know that I just took your negative and turned it into a positive, but that is sort of what I do.
For that, I mean, do you know the joke about the har and the sar?
No.
My Rebbe or Shlomo Friedman likes to say, I think he was quoting for someone else, that the difference between a har and a sar is that a har, the closer you get to it, the bigger it seems, and a sar, the closer you get to it, the smaller he seems.
It gives a whole new appreciation for the Mishnah and Avot, that you should stay away from the reshut because they use you and abuse you.
Yes, the Mishnah got it right in many ways. So before we wrap up this conversation, you mentioned all these things that you're involved in, shul, writing. There's also other things we haven't even gotten to, podcasting, music, and other projects as well. So tell us a little bit about your approach to productivity, to time management. How are you able to accomplish all these things?
So first of all, I love just doing things, and I think that's really the foundation in how I get things done. Is that when the opportunity comes, when I have the inspiration to do something, I just do it, and that's part one. So, for example, I had a goal of running a marathon, and I was training for the marathon, and then all of a sudden on a Tuesday morning, I just ran a marathon because I started running, and I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm doing. So that's one aspect. Get something in my head, I just do it. I don't wait. And the second aspect of it is being overall structured. If I give an example, I guess again with running, I say that I'll run 3 times a week, but I won't give specific days so that I know that by the end of the week, I'm going to do those runs. But if there's a holiday, or if I'm not feeling well, or if I have to take care of an errand or family, then so I won't do it on. If I have a specific day, I might just miss out on it by not having a specific day. I know that by the end of the week, I'm sharing a Devar Torah, but so I have these types of things that are, I have a deadline to do them, but I don't have a specific time to do it. And so the combination of I'm just going to get it done and knowing by when it needs to get done helps me manage and juggle all these projects. Also, you have to love the types of things that you're doing. I don't do anything that I don't love doing.
Amazing. Okay, let's go to our rapid fire questions. We are now transitioning to the summer. So, what does Reuven like to do on his long summer Shabbos afternoons?
I like to read, learn. That's mostly what I like to do on long. And now that it's actually much longer, I also like to play games with my kids.
What's your favorite game to play with them?
Whatever they pick. If they're willing to spend time with me, I am spending time with them.
Sick.
Recently, they like Monopoly, Clue Junior, Stratego. Those are the games.
Amazing. So you do a lot of writing, a lot of content creation, a lot of stuff that you're involved in. But maybe just when we focus on community, what's your most inspirational book or sefer that gives you insights into what communities should look like?
I love reading books from different decades on contemporary Jewish issues. So I can see what was in my house. I have one from the 60s and from the 80s, and I've read other ones from people's houses from the 2000s. And I love seeing that every decade we deal with the same stuff. So I can give you some examples of books that I read that I've liked. One of them is A Jew in American Life. That was the book from the 60s, and there's one called The Jewish Agenda, I think it was called, which I almost didn't read because the title was very unappealing. But then when I looked at the table of contents, I ended up reading it, and it was interesting. Like, it's just interesting to see there are certain spicy topics that are of each decade, but the same. How do we educate our kids? How do we keep people focused? How do we get avodas Hashem? It's all the same.
Okay, and if you had to choose any job in the world, a new job that you in an industry that you have not yet been involved in, maybe something that you dreamed of doing as a kid, what would that be?
That I haven't yet been involved in.
That narrows it down a lot.
That narrows it down a lot. I had a better answer if something I've been involved in. I probably would be a consultant of sorts, being able to, or a public speaker, that type of thing. I haven't really done that.
Okay. Reuven Kirschner, Mazel Tov on the new sefer. Kol hakol to all the work that you're doing in Karmei Gat and beyond. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yaakov, it's a real pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and to share Torah.